We shift our focus to this story now. Former President Jacob Zuma returned to the Pretoria High Court today, where arguments in the state's bid to recover nearly 28.9 million in legal fees spent on his defense during the long-running arms deal corruption case were heard. The courtroom was tense as lawyers for the presidency and the state attorney argued that Zuma was never entitled to tax-funded legal support, citing a 2024 Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that ordered him to reimburse the state. Zuma's legal team pushed back, claiming the payments were authorized and necessary given the complexity of the case. But state lawyers insisted the funds were used for personal benefit and violated procurement protocols. There were heated exchanges over the breakdown of the 28.9 million, which covered legal counsel, court costs and travel expenses. The judge questioned whether the payments were properly vetted and whether Zuma's office had misled the state attorney. All right, now SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko has been monitoring those proceedings and joins us live with the very latest. Good afternoon, Samkele. Now, this case is being dubbed a high-stakes legal showdown. Before we get to today's proceedings, just remind us of the facts around this specific matter.
This case is around that particular case that was brought up by the Democratic Alliance and the Economic Freedom Fighters around Zuma's legal fees being paid by the state on his corruption trial that pertains to the arms deal. Remember that court judgment that said in the High Court that Zuma was not liable to be paid for his personal cost of his legal cases by the state, and that SCA judgment upholding the High Court judgment that these monies must be recouped. But in this court appearance here today, we have seen the legal team of the presidency arguing through its senior counsel that Jacob Zuma must be made liable to pay back these particular funds of 28.9 million rands that have ultimately accumulated over the years for his personal cases that amount to the corruption case. And Zuma's legal team, through advocate Tabani Masugu, arguing that this is through the delinquency and the bad legal advice of the state, and that former President Zuma was not found by any High Court judgment or by the Supreme Court of Appeals of being legally wanting when it comes to these funds being paid over to him for his legal cases, and that was the work of the legal advice of the state. And the state bureaucrats who were there at the time should be the ones whom are liable, and for the state to jump to recoup these particular funds from Jacob Zuma personally, it is not legally permissible, and that he did not make the decision to give those funds for his legal cases to himself, and that the state should look at other avenues of recouping these particular funds and not from Jacob Zuma. The DA does have an application through its senior counsel in looking at the matter that the interest of this order, when it was declared, should be accumulated and brought forth to them over and above the 28.9 million rands that Jacob Zuma is being sought to pay back to the state. Zuma argues that if his pension is attached, he will be impoverished, and that will disadvantage his family. And also that the Nkandla homestead cannot be attached because it belongs to tribal land owned by the Ingonyama Trust. The DA goes further to say that on top of the 28.9 million rands that Zuma has to pay back, interest that has accumulated after the declaratory order was made must be coupled and brought forth in this application. The state has decided not to oppose the DA's application of interest and is not party to that particular application.
Samkele, we understand there was also a heated exchange around the calculations or costings insofar as the 28.9 million is concerned. What were the issues there? It covered travel costs, also legal counsel. What was there?
There is an issue on the costing of it. There was particularly looking at issues of how these monies have accumulated over the period of time, what method was used to calculate these particular funds, who was paid at that particular time. Those are some of the issues being ventilated by the legal teams, particularly in the case of the presidency, looking of where these funds come from. I do know that Advocate Tabani Masugu did look and saying that he was not there at the time. There was at the time Kemp, Mike Halley, who were there as Zuma's legal representatives of that particular case. They were the ones whom were receiving these particular funds from the state. But the issue, the crux of the issue of this particular case, particularly from the point of Jacob Zuma's legal team led by senior counsel advocate Thabani Masuku is that Jacob Zuma, former President Zuma rather, is not liable to pay any of the costs that he's been slapped with in paying back to the state of the 28.9 million rands, with that interest being coupled up by the Democratic Alliance, because he is not the one who signed off on these funds. There are government bureaucrats who signed off on giving Jacob Zuma these particular funds to pay for his legal fees. He argues that this is a mistake and an unconstitutional resolution that is against government's PFMA to award Zuma these funds to pay for his legal fees. That is the crux of the case that is being argued by Jacob Zuma's legal team, in also saying that it can't be that the state moves forth in going to Jacob Zuma when the declaratory order that was granted by the SCA and the High Court did not say that Jacob Zuma must personally pay back these particular funds. It did not attach it to any individual, but the state moved first to try and recoup these funds from Jacob Zuma, which they deem is wrong, unfair, and unlawful.
Samkele, thank you very much for that update. That's SABC News senior reporter Samkele Maseko there, who's been monitoring what is being dubbed a high-stakes legal showdown where the state is attempting to recoup 28.9 million in legal fees from former President Jacob Zuma.